We're back. We're live. We're Think Tech doing Energy Thursday today, on Thursday, with Marco Mangelsdorf of, what's your company name, Marco?
Provision Solar.
I knew that. Provision Solar in Hilo, Hawaii. And we're talking about winding up the year with solar with Marco Mangelsdorf. We like to check in with him as often as we can, actually, and find out what's really going on in the solar industry. And as you must know, everyone knows that solar is a leading feature of the development of clean energy in Hawaii, more and more. And yet there are more issues around it. And recently, Marco sent me a kind of a end of year analysis of who was doing what in solar, and that is cause for a good discussion here today on Think Tech. So, Marco, welcome again to the show.
Thank you so much. It's always great to be back with you, Jay.
Same. Tell us about the figures that you have compiled, your sources, what the figures are.
Well, I rely principally on the permit data, which is provided by the City and County of Honolulu Department of Planning and Permitting, and they're usually quite good about putting this data up on a fairly timely fashion. And there's just a wealth of information there to be gleaned in terms of who's doing what in terms of photovoltaic systems across Oahu. And it's just, even though my company does not compete on Oahu, I'm still very interested from kind of an academic standpoint, and also one who's very interested in our industry here in the state in general, to know what's going on. And I think some of the main bullet points looking back over 2013 is that we will be down on Oahu, at least collectively, probably somewhere between 20 and 25% in terms of the number of photovoltaic system permits issued by DPP. And I estimate the total value of all those projects will probably be down even a little bit more, maybe in the 25 to 30% range. And keep in mind that this comes after the incredibly monster year that took place in 2012. So there is certainly a trend, a downward trend that has been going on for the past 7 months straight now, compared to the previous 7 months, or the same 7 months in 2012. And if you were to look at the, let's say, the top 15 PV players, contractors there on Oahu, over the past 12 months, out of those 15, 12 of them have seen decreases in their sales and their permit numbers, whereas only 3 have seen increases. So that's good for those 3, and not so good for the balance of the 12. So
Well, what is go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm sort of bursting to ask you, what's your analysis these days? I know you follow this, and we've talked about this very issue before, but what's your analysis these days on the reasons for this? Because now, where before we might have, concluded that there was a short-term, drop. It's kind of confirmed that this drop is really a very large drop. It's profound, and it's affecting the industry, and it's here. It's here to. I don't know if it's here to stay, but it's definitely here. It's not a fluke. It really is going on. And so, what is your analysis for why?
Well, in previous conversations, you and I have been discussing those particular same questions, and my first response typically has been because of HECO grid saturation issues, which has become much more prominent over the past 6 or so months than it was in the previous months and the previous years. So that's certainly undeniable that there are more circuits on Oahu that are highly penetrated by PV, and that's putting the brakes on sales in those particular circuits and installations in those particular circuits. And I think beyond that, there is a perception that much of the grid is impacted, and this is causing some cold feet or concern on the part of perhaps would-be buyers, even though HECO has gone to some lengths to to put out there publicly that it's a minority of circuits that are in this highly saturated state. But I think that there's a greater anxiety at this point amongst the buying public that, gee, maybe if I were to purchase a system, I couldn't interconnect. So
this is not that the saturation is actually stopping buyers from buying. It's that buyers perceive that they will be stopped, and so they don't come to the table at all.
I think that any type of uncertainty in the market, whatever that market happens to be, is not all that good for business. Although conversely, one could argue that, especially if you see some of the ads these days, that the contractors are playing up on what they put out as a sense of urgency. In other words, better act now before you won't have the chance to go PV in your neighborhood because it will be all filled up. So I guess you can kind of see cross purposeful trends going on there. I think it's also possible that, with any type of product, there is an increase in adoption, and there's a peak, and then there's going to be a decrease in adoption. Whether we've hit definitively that peak in adoption, and those people who are likely to go PV already have done so, it's too early to tell. One of the interesting trends that I've picked up on just in the past month or so, Jay, is if you look at the mainland and look at what's called third-party ownership, or TPO for short, third-party ownership for residential photovoltaic systems, which means that another entity such as a Sunrun or Solar City, which has been one of the relatively few companies on Oahu, solar companies that has actually seen their numbers increase from 2013 over to from 2012. That particular option of acquisition on the mainland with these third-party owners appears to have peaked over the past 6 to 12 months. I have the data for a number of the key states in the mainland, and all those states show that third-party ownership as far as residential PV systems has in fact peaked and is on the downward trend. However, yet again, it appears that Hawaii is maybe a year or two behind that particular trend line compared to what's going on in the mainland, which is to say that third-party ownership, that particular acquisition option, doesn't appear to have peaked yet here in the state of Hawaii. So that the Solar Cities, the Sunruns, the SunPower, and Vivint, of course, Vivint being one of the top players over there, that those homeowners who don't want to pay for a system in its entirety, who don't want the tax credits or don't need the tax credits, have been more willing to adopt this particular option to be able to go PV with little or nothing out of pocket.
That still requires, connection, though. It's still limited to circuits where, the utility is going to allow the connection. It strikes me that there's another factor at play, too, and that is the low-hanging fruit factor. There's
right.
X number of people in the cohort, who want to be early adopters, who want to have PV, who want to have all the benefits of PV. Not only the tax benefits, but all the the security benefits, call them, of PV, and it's not everybody. It's not everybody. So when you exhaust the supply of people who are excited like that, then the rest of the population is not going to be so excited, and they're not going to do it. And maybe we have crossed that line, or we're coming up on that line now. Don't you think?
I think that's certainly a possibility. And if you look at the numbers in terms of PV system adoption from state to state to state across the U.S., Hawaii has one of the highest PV adoption rates on a per capita basis than pretty much every state. I don't know what the up-to-the-minute data is on that particular figure, but last I looked, based on the third quarter of this year, I think we were in the number 3 position, if memory serves correctly. So we've come a long ways in a really short amount of time in terms of the number or the percentage of the average homeowner who has a photovoltaic system on their home. So how much further can we go? Like you said, how many possible customers are still out there that are interested in going this route?
Yeah. Well, this opens up the whole question. There's so many questions that flow out of this data. Let me throw one in for discussion, and that is what's going to happen next year. Certainly this year, it's clear that we've had a sort of an annual decline against last year. But what's going to happen next year? Is it going to stay at this level, Marco? Or is it going to be a further decline for one reason or another, or for the compounding of the reasons we've been talking about?
Well, all eyes will yet again be on the legislature, which goes back into session in January and does their business from January until May. And I have no doubt that there will be renewed efforts to modify, adjust, tinker with the existing renewable energy income tax credit. And whether the legislature will be successful in actually passing a bill and getting it to the governor's desk this time, which they failed to do last session, they failed to do the session before that. Of course, one can never know this early on. But if I was a betting man, I think I probably would put some money on the likelihood of probably a bill getting to the governor's desk this next session. They came awfully close in getting one out of a final conference committee back in early May that ultimately did not get out of the conference committee. So I'd be tempted to wager that they'll probably be successful in getting something to the governor this coming year. And I think it'll likely do two things. It'll put a sunset date on the renewable energy tax credit, which right now does not have a sunset date, and it will also most likely ramp down that credit, not from 35% to zero, but probably a gradual step down over X number of years. And most likely, from what I understand from my friends at the Department of Taxation, there's going to be the announcement or the publication sometime around January of what the tax credit hit on the state's general fund was from tax year 2012, and that will undoubtedly be a record amount because of the record amount of PV that went in 2012.
Yeah, so we only find out about it now, and it was a lot of money. I saw that in the materials you sent. How much was it?
Well, we don't know yet because DOTAX is still crunching the numbers, and there's about a year or year plus lag from when one calendar year ends to when they have enough data and the confidence in the data to release it.
Well, I guess I'm talking about the prior year. What was it in the prior year?
For the calendar year 2011, it was approximately 70 million.
Mm-hmm.
So my guess, which isn't all that much backed up with a whole bunch of hard data, my guess is probably going to be somewhere in the 200 million range for the calendar year 2012.
Yeah, now that's a lot of money. That's as much of an incentive as we've ever had for anything.
And I think that's going to get the attention of not just a few legislators in terms of, gee, this is a lot of money. And I think another thing that the Department of Taxation will do or should do is that they're going to break down that number, whether it's 150 million, 175 million, 200 plus million, they're going to break it down between the chunk of that went as a credit versus the chunk of that went as a refund.
Mm-hmm.
And that 24.5% refund will most likely be shown to have gone, the large majority of it, right out of state to mainland banks and mainland investors. And whether that's going to make much of a difference then to legislators or not, well, I can't say, but I think that's going to get people's attention, and there's legitimate debate to be had as to, gee, just how much longer are tax credits needed, and really what is the purpose of a tax credit. And I differ from a lot of my colleagues who want to keep it going in a very robust fashion for pretty much as long as possible. And I happen to see that, or believe that tax credits in this case are should be designed to bring about a reduction in cost and a increase in adoption. And once that takes place, which I believe it has to a large extent, then it is time to start ramping it down. So that's not a popular view to be held amongst people in my line of business, but
no. But let's examine the effects of ramping it down right after this, or terminating it right after this break. That's Marco Mangelsdorf of Provision Solar and Hilo. He joins us by phone. Here we are on Thursday, so it's Energy Thursday in Think Tech Talks, and we're talking about winding up this year with solar with Marco. Be right back after this short break.
Aloha, I'm Nicole Horry for Think Tech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
We're back. Welcome back to Think Tech on a Thursday, and it's Energy Thursday today, and we're talking about winding up the year with solar, and I guess that's primarily PV, with Marco Mangelsdorf of Provision Solar in Hilo. He joins us by phone from Hilo. So, Marco, we spoke before the break, about the possibility of, I guess two things, about legislation regarding the existing levels of solar tax credits, but also about what happens when the headline hits and it says that we might be spending, we have spent maybe up to $200 million on these credits for the as yet uncalculated year of 2012. So I guess my question to you is, what happens? How does this headline affect things? How does a reduction, possibly a reduction or a ramping down of the credit, affect the industry? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, the PV industry trade group, or groups, excuse me, the most notable one being the Hawaii Solar Energy Association, the HSEA. They have been working, along with Blue Planet, if I'm not mistaken, they've been working with an economist, excuse me, by the name of Tom Lodat, there on Oahu, who I have a lot of respect for. And it's Tom's analysis that for every dollar that does not go into the general fund due to the solar tax credit is actually comes back to the state in higher value. In other words, for every dollar that is not coming back to the state is accruing if I'm not mistaken, $2 or more in benefits. So the counter argument that has been made over the years is that don't focus on all the money supposedly that the state's general fund lost out on, but focus instead on all the benefits that accrued in terms of putting people to work and increasing the tax base and so forth and so on.
I don't know if that argument's going to work, on the PV credits, but let me say that argument was made on Act 221. And it never had traction with the legislature. They just couldn't see that. They saw the money going out, but the money coming back into the state's coffers was a little too vague for them, and they just didn't buy it.
I would tend to support your view as well, Jay, because the trade groups used that line of reasoning last year at the end of the session, and it wasn't enough to get that conference committee to pass a bill, that compromise bill that they were largely supportive of. It wasn't enough to get the legislators, the conference committee members, especially the so-called money chairs of the House and the Senate, respectively, to be able to sign off on that compromise bill. So I agree. I don't think that argument has held much sway in the past, and probably won't.
There was something in today's paper about trying to predict the level of the economic recovery. It's been a soft recovery. It hasn't been a really successful, flamboyant, break out the champagne type of recovery at any point. And what's more is, as I recall, there was an article in the headline, I didn't read the article, but there was a headline in today's paper about how maybe as the Council on Revenues doesn't see, a really bright future for next year, largely because of softness in tourism. And this is going to affect the way the money committees in the legislature conduct themselves on this and other issues in the 2014 legislature. So they may not be all that excited about spending money in general, and thus they may be interested in knocking down these credits. So.
I think that's a reasonable possibility when all is said and done, that they will agree on a bill that will ramp the credits down over a period of time. I don't think they'll go off the cliff in terms of them disappearing on July 1. I think that would be highly doubtful, but there will likely be a ramp down. There will also be the counter argument that we've heard before, that, well, in order for the state to get to the ambitious HCEI Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative goals of 70% energy efficiency and renewables by 2030, that this is the worst time to go after renewable energy tax credits. But again, I don't see that having as much sway probably as its proponents would like. So,
what about the industry in general, Marco? It seems like that if you drop the credits, the industry is going to consolidate, is a euphemism. I mean, it's going to get hurt.
Right.
And it's and maybe that damage is going to be long-term damage, and that damage will probably result, to the degree it happens, in a slowdown. It's like a cycle. It's a feedback loop. It's going to result in fewer installations, and thus, as you were suggesting, we're going to have trouble making goals. PV is the most exciting renewable in the sense that it's had the most progress. And what I always factor in for myself is that there's no opposition to PV. Aside from this credit issue, nobody complains about the neighbor putting PV on the roof. Every other renewable has, what do you call it? Community issues, but not this one. And if the industry is, forced to consolidate, or for any reason it does consolidate, then we're going to see a slowdown in PV installation in general. Not only the industry, but the net effect of all that. What do you think?
I agree. I cannot point to any likely factors which would cause 2014 to be an increase over 2013. So it is going to be more or less the same, or somewhat down, most likely. And when you have as many as 280 plus contractors on Oahu who have pulled PV permits in the past 12 or so months, it's inevitable that a number of these contractors will get out of PV or disappear entirely. And I ran by one of these kind of off-quoted set of statistics not too long ago that I'll share with you, which you probably heard in one form or another as well over the years, which is that as far as the businesses that start, that 40% of them approximately fail within the first year, 80% of them go under within 5 years, and by the end of 10 years, only 4% are still left standing, with obviously 96% failure rates within 10 years. So
those are PV businesses or businesses?
No, businesses in general.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no reason to think that somehow the PV industry in Hawaii or the mainland is immune to the usual trends or usual percentage of fatalities, essentially, that businesses in general go through. So there will be a winnowing of the field, and of course, I hope that I'm not one of the ones winnowed, as do all most of my colleagues, I'm sure. But I believe it is inevitable that there will be a downsizing and there will be people dropping out, and that's part of the business cycle. And my concern has been, based on having gone through something like this on the mainland in California in the 80s and 90s, is after the solar thermal bubble essentially burst in the early 1980s, there were many solar hot water heating systems which are effectively left orphaned, and that made for a growing service and repair business, and there's no doubt in my mind that will be similarly happening in years to come across our islands, as right now there are approximately 35, 36, 37,000 grid-connected solar electric systems across the state. And there's no doubt in my mind that thousands of those systems over the next handful of years will effectively be left orphaned, where there will be maintenance required, service required, repair required, and the company that put the system in will either no longer be around, or they will no longer have the wherewithal, the expertise, the personnel, or the desire to take care of the projects that were sold by people probably who have come and gone from their company 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago.
Well, let's talk about what happens. Say year 5, okay? And you know, if there is a manufacturer's warranty on the panel, then theoretically, am I right? Any installer could be contacted. Any installer would be able to perform the warranty work as, say, an authorized shop by the panel maker, and the panel maker would make good on the warranty. Isn't that what happens when the panel fails within the warranty period?
Yes, with the very big caveat that the solar module manufacturer has to be still around, has to still be in business. And one notable example is you had the company known as Suntech Power, who based in Jiangsu province, right outside of Shanghai in China. Suntech Power was the number one PV manufacturer in the world in 2010 and 2011, and they essentially went all but belly up in 2012 and 2013. So there's still what I call a zombie solar company, where it's still amazing that they're even still in business in some form or fashion. But there has been no shortage of PV module manufacturers who have exited the playing field, and when that happens, it is essentially say goodbye to the warranty.
Okay, so there's a problem there, because the field is changing so fast, comings and goings and whatnot. If your panel manufacturer is not around, you know, you're in trouble. Now, what about the warranties that you know, of installation? The installation warranty. If there's a problem with the installation, or it needs to be maintained in some way, and your original contractor is not available. Well, the first question, I suppose, what is the customary warranty period for installation warranty claims? I mean, how long does you know, one of these contractors promise to make good on problems in installation? Is it 2 years, 5 years, 1 year? What is it?
It has gone up over the past several years, and the typical system or installation warranty that I have been seeing is between 5 to 10 years. And in my opinion, that is a little understood yet substantial liability that contractors take on with really little or no clue about what they're getting into when they're offering as long as a 10-year warranty. And I have little doubt that there are virtually no contractors out there who are putting money in kind of a special warranty claims or service and maintenance account to be able to cover themselves in 5, let alone 10 years. So I see that as something that is, like I said, little understood in terms of contractors who are trying to maintain cash flow, trying to continue sales, trying to keep their crews busy, and feel that, by golly, if I offer a 10-year warranty, I can differentiate myself between or from the 3 or 4 or more other quotes that Mr. Homeowner or Mrs. Homeowner is looking at on their kitchen table. And to me, it is a substantial risk as a contractor when you are putting your company out there being on the hook for that many years.
Yeah. Oh, that is we haven't talked about that before. That's really chilling, as a matter of fact. So if I'm a homeowner and I get this warranty, there are real issues as to whether it will be performed in the normal ebb and flow of companies coming and going out of business, what have you. And then to add on to that, we have a consolidation happening where
Right.
companies are, going out of business, perhaps at a higher rate than would be normal. And all of that has a direct effect on my installation and the ability that I have to get it fixed if anything goes wrong, even within what I thought was a warranty period. Yeah.
Right, and I'll tell you, Jay, one of the ways to get around that essentially is to go with a PV system that you're not paying for. In other words, you are not accruing the tax credits. You are not paying that $15,000, $20,000, $25,000, $50,000 out of pocket. You're not financing it through a loan through your credit union or bank or First Hawaiian. You're going with Vivint. You're going with Solar City. You're going with Sunrun. Somebody else is owning it, and that somebody else is dependent upon the proper long-term operation of the system to produce power so that they continue to make money back on their initial investment. So it is their kuleana, their interest, strongly in their interest, to keep the system operating at whatever cost it takes. So that is a way, when you think about it, to be able to reduce the risk of spending tens of thousands of dollars for a system from a contractor that may or may not be around in a year, 2 or 5, and have somebody else be responsible for it.
Yeah, that certainly is an appealing point. And what about the possibility of a sort of warranty market where I can go to a third person? Cars have this. I can go to a third person and buy a warranty for some flat sum, even at any point, but especially at the point where I have the thing done in the first place, and I pay them whatever it takes, and they come no matter what to fix it, even if the original manufacturer or the original installer isn't around. Is there a market for that? Is anybody doing that?
I don't know, honestly, but I would think that some clever person or persons at the insurance companies, either local or on the mainland, have had to have thought of that possibility. So my guess is that it's probably out there.
Okay, speaking of out there, we're going to take a short break, Marco. I hope you don't mind. This is Think Tech Talks, doing energy on Thursday, talking about winding up the year with solar with Marco Mangelsdorf of Provision Solar. He joins us from his company in Hilo. We'll be right back after this short break.
We want to thank our underwriters.
Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve.
Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company.
The High Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency, attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism.
Castle and Cook Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state.
Hawaii Gas, formerly the Gas Company, a proponent of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future.
Collateral Analytics, a Hawaii-based tech company empowering the real estate industry with greater and faster access to the tools and data they need to make better informed property investment decisions.
I'm Nicole Horry. Thanks so much for joining us on Think Tech.
I'm Maria Kashem. See you next time.
We're back. We're live. This is Think Tech Talks with Marco Mangelsdorf, talking about winding up the year with solar. He joins us by phone from Hilo, and we were talking, about how it looks going forward after the year with solar here in 2013. And one of the things that I guess we didn't really catch is the situation on the Big Island, which is different under the Hawaii Electric Light Company. What is going on the Big Island as opposed to the numbers you have for Oahu?
Well, surprisingly, the preliminary data that I have been told about for the Big Island is that it looks like the overall PV numbers for grid-tied systems on the Big Island will be up in 2013 compared to 2012. And I don't know by how much, but even a small incremental increase would be a substantial counter trend to what's happening on the most populous island in the state. And I am somewhat puzzled by that, and I've been trying to think about and figure out now how can that be that the Big Island would be counter to what's going on in Oahu. And it would be great to be able to have Maui data to be able to look at the three biggest counties in the state, but unfortunately that's not as easy to come by because of the database that the county of Maui operates. So I can't speak to Maui, but the Big Island apparently is going to be somewhat up this year compared to last year. And
want to speculate with me? Let's speculate why that might be so.
Well, we can see that on Oahu, over the past 24 months, it's been much more, literally, if you look at the graphs, the bar graphs, it's been much more roller coaster fashion, with a dramatic increase the last 6 months of 2012 and a substantial decrease in the first months of 2013, whereas the Big Island has been much less of that type of super hilly roller coaster. So it did not increase as dramatically in 2012 as Oahu did. Therefore, there was, I'm kind of grasping here somewhat, but there was less of a potential for a substantial decrease because there wasn't all that dramatic of an increase to begin with.
Yeah, but it also could be, let me throw one at you. I mean, you live there, so you're going to have a huge advantage, but to me, maybe it's also that the Big Island is more on photovoltaic. They're more on clean energy, that everyone wants to get on the bandwagon, and the whole concept of low-hanging fruit is sort of different on the Big Island. People are more excited about it. Any chance that kind of thing is working?
Kind of hard to say. I mean, we've been more, Helco has been more progressive in terms of increasing its renewable energy percentage than HECO and MECO have, but MECO is also doing better than HECO. But Helco having put a geothermal venture for the past, 20 years or so, and that supplies somewhere around 20% of the island's electricity. And then we've got two big wind farms that provide a fairly substantial chunk. So perhaps there's some type of stronger renewable energy ethos out here. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. I'm not. Yeah, okay. I don't really have a tremendous amount of confidence in any type of explanation as to why the Big Island has been more immune to the more volatile trends on Oahu.
I'm sure the answer will emerge going forward, and we can find it. But in the last few minutes, Marco, I would like to talk about the events on Molokai. You sent me a piece which was very interesting. I think it was last week in the Molokai Dispatch. And I studied that. I was very interested in that. And then you mentioned there's an article this morning in Pacific Business News. So what's the most recent? Then we can talk about the battery article that you sent last week.
Well, Molokai, which is just a little quick personal story, has always been very near and dear to my heart. My father brought me there fishing when I was 9-10 years old along the East End then, and that was a very formative and wonderful experience in my youth, and I've had the great opportunity to go back there and work on a number of projects. My company has done a number of the larger commercial projects over there, and also a number of homeowners as well. So I really jump at the chance, any chance I get to go and spend time there. It's just such a wonderful, super special kind of old Hawaii energy.
No pun intended.
atmosphere. No, not at all. Not at all. So I was there over the Thanksgiving weekend and talked to one of my reporter friends there, Catherine Cluett, who is the editor-in-chief of the Molokai Dispatch, and she had just did a piece on what MECO is trying to do there, and it's an interesting test case because the MECO grid on Molokai is very limited, especially in comparison to the grid on Maui proper, Oahu, Big Island, and so forth. And there has been a substantial amount of PV there over the years to the point where much of the island is very saturated, and the likelihood of putting a whole bunch more PV is limited at this time, which has caused grief, understandably, for the homeowners who've been waiting 6 months, 1 year, or longer for MECO to be able to give them some positive news. So apparently, they are going to, MECO, along with the Hawaii Natural Energy Institute, is going to move forward with a 3-megawatt battery bank. They're right at the single, one and only MECO power plant on the island that will act as essentially a stabilizer to be able to allow the MECO grid there, which is serving all perhaps not all 7,000 residents, because some of them live off-grid, but MECO has about 2,000 customers on the island, and of course, many more people live per household than just the MECO customers. So they have come up with this battery idea, which is going to be funded from multiple sources, which was going to allow MECO a greater ability to be able to ride out grid disturbances, which some of my friends and some of my customers have been telling me over the past 6 months to 12 months is that the outages there have become more frequent.
And brownouts as well.
Exactly, which is essentially a voltage sag, and MECO is concerned enough that they're going to put some of their money into a battery bank, which is going to hopefully alleviate some of these power quality issues. But as I believe my friend Matt McNeff, who's one of the renewable energy managers there at MECO, stated in the piece, is that that's not going to have, or was it Rick Rocheleau, one of the two, said that the 3-megawatt battery at the power plant is not going to make a tangible difference in terms of homeowners or others on Molokai to be able to put more PV in.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really, I guess one of the points I would make about Molokai is it's really kind of a test case as to, gee, what's going on with an isolated grid, in this case a much smaller grid, when you really start pushing the limits of distributed generation in the form of PV, and you do have backfeed into distribution lines. And what I mean by distribution is the utility in this particular instance, MECO, is producing power or transmitting power from the power plant at 12 plus kilovolts, 12,000 kilovolts. And that is transmitted on power lines across the island, and then in order to make it usable to the hospitals and the stores and the people who live there, there are transformers on site there essentially that drop that voltage from 12,000 plus volts down to typically 120 or 240 volt split phase. And once you have a surplus of power being produced from a local PV system that needs to go somewhere, it is going to those transformers and it's being pumped into the transmission distribution line. And that is something that is an experiment or a work in progress that the utilities are trying to figure out, essentially, how can they change from a transmission-only based model to a model, a grid, that allows for power flow in two directions. And there's a lot of talk, of course, about smart grids and smart meters and smart this and smart that. But fundamentally, there are some substantial design and engineering challenges here that as much as we in the industry would like for dramatic improvements to take place and really rapid increases in the grid being able to take more and more and more PV on a short-term basis, I just don't see that happening. It's much more of a cautious, incremental approach, which is causing a lot of grief amongst my colleagues and also amongst people in the public and amongst the legislators and even some of the PUC commissioners have voiced their frustration with the slow pace of events. But as I've said, I think so many times over these past several years, that I just don't see some type of quick and easy solution from day one to day two that's going to get us to where we want to go. And
Well, don't you think that the installation of this battery, will be a sort of a laboratory experiment? I understand that HNEI is going to collect data on this for some time to try to understand exactly how this works in the microcosmic grid of Molokai, 7,000 people. And in order to learn how you build a smart grid, like in a larger place, like in Oahu, with a battery, because that's what we're missing. All these problems with PV would be ameliorated if interconnect problems would be ameliorated if we had a big battery, or some way of smoothing out the curve, including overnight when there is no sun.
Right.
And this may be, like the first real step in Hawaii to examine a battery on the grid and build the notion of a smart grid around the battery, and maybe find out things we don't know yet. Don't you think that Molokai could be helpful?
I agree, and if you get a chance to read my friend Dwayne Shimagawa's piece in today's Pacific Business News, he wrote about this company called, I think it was Princeton Energy Group out of California, which is proposing a 20 megawatt photovoltaic project for Molokai right outside of Kaunakakai. That if that were to go through, if it were to meet with MECO's approval, the PUC's approval, land use approval, approval after approval after approval after approval, with a lot of approvals down the road, if they were to get to that point, that would be leaving Molokai essentially 100% of its energy for electricity production and consumption could come from PV.
No, that would be dynamite. But what I don't understand is last week the Molokai Dispatch reports this much smaller battery, 2 or 3 megawatts, and now PBN reporting a Princeton 20 megawatt battery, which was much more promising. What's really happening over there, Marco? I get confused.
Well, it's much more likely that there will be the installation of this 3 megawatt battery, which will go next to the single MECO power plant there outside of Kaunakakai as you're going to Oka. That is most likely a done deal. It's something that undoubtedly MECO has researched and thought about for a long time. They're working with HNEI on this, and that very likely will happen. Whereas you know as well as I do that various interested and eager parties come from beyond our shores and are somehow enchanted by this island or that island based on their vacation stay, and they come up with all sorts of interesting ideas about how they want to help the natives. And
they put it in the paper right away.
and they put it in the paper right away. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So how much of it there's actual fire versus smoke? Dwayne can speak to that. But in principle, after all these almost countless approvals, it's kind of a neat idea. And if somebody is willing to pony up the money to fund something like that, Molokai could be a test case of a island grid that is able to be
self-sustaining.
Self-sustaining with PV and obviously some rather large storage capacity.
Yeah. Oh, that's very exciting. Well, Marco, we're at the end of our time here. I want to thank you again for coming on, and say that even though we talked about winding up the year with solar, we can still talk again, either this year or early next, and I look forward to that.
I'm hoping to be in China the early part of January, so maybe we can do a China PV in China or renewable energy in China show.
Yes, I'm putting it on the calendar. I'll send you some dates. We'll set it up for sure. We love to do that. Thank you so much, Marco. That's Marco Mangelsdorf, Provision Solar, talking with us by telephone from Hilo here on Think Tech Talks Energy Thursday, winding up the year with solar. Thanks again, Marco.
It is always a great pleasure, Jay. Thank you so much.
Aloha.